Podcast17, broadcasting from deep within Combine territory. It is every citizen's duty to resist the Combine and learn the truth.
I'm back. Did you miss me? Hello, this is Phillip from Planetphillip here. I've been locked in No PK's basement for the last week, finally managed to escape a few moments ago, rushed to my house to get online to record this for you. So I'm glad to be back. With me today we have William and Tobias and Alexander. So gentlemen, please introduce yourselves.
Hey everybody, I am back for another episode. You know, I haven't missed an episode of Podcast17, so obviously I get more of the marks here. I would just like to say a few things. I am in an insanely good mood because I just got these new pants that I'm wearing right now, and they're lined with flannel. If that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will, because it's like I'm wearing pajamas, but on the outside, they're pants.
Well, my name is Tobias. I'm the creator behind Suicide Survival, a mod for Half-Life 2. And I'm currently studying game design in the 5th semester in Switzerland. And I'm doing my final project in the summer next year.
Hi, I'm Alexander, wannabe game designer, former writer for Planet Half-Life, and all-around official Half-Life guru.
Tobias, tell us about game design. What are you specifically studying? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who want to know more about that. How'd you get into it? I mean, we'll talk more in your interview, but I'm curious right now.
It's a bachelor degree at Art University in Zurich, Switzerland, and it's basically all the stuff related to making games. So it's just not just designing games, but it's also like how do you make a model, how do you texture, how do you make sounds, what ideas are good, what ideas are bad. Yeah, stuff like that. And it's more like arts orientated, so not like mainstream games, but more like independent games, like stuff that hasn't been done before, or new stuff, or just like art stuff, yeah.
Wow, very cool. Anyway, Phillip, we have a slew of podcast news. You want to get started on that?
Certainly, William. First up is the survey. We have been listening to you and we have made some changes. We recently posted something called the survey feedback, where William and I replied to the relevant points made on the survey. Most of them were just comments rather than the actual information we received. So if you've written something in the survey and think it deserved a reply, have a look. Maybe we've already replied to it. We're going to make some changes based on the information we've received. One of them being, instead of having a website of the week and a video of the week, we're going to change that to video of the month, and then another week we'll have website of the month, and then we'll have a few other things as well. So instead of having those things weekly, they'll be moved to monthly. Please, please, please keep the survey completions coming in, because the more we learn about what you want and what you don't want, the better this podcast will be.
Also, I don't know who posted that I have an accent, but I do not have an accent. I would just like to say that. And Blast from the Past is coming back next week. So we are listening to you guys. So if you have any suggestions, we definitely listen. We definitely put it on the show. So don't hesitate to fill out those surveys. I just wanted to reinforce that fact, because Blast from the Past is coming back.
And in case William's accent was too strong there for those listeners, he said Blast from the Past is coming back. Oh, and video, sorry William, audio and video comments are the next thing on the list. I managed to find something on the sphere of WordPress, and I installed it on Planetphillip yesterday, and it was so cool I decided that we should have it for Podcast 17. It basically allows you to post either audio-only comments or audio and video comments. Really easy to use. You don't have to install any software. You just need a modern browser and Flash installed. If you don't like what you've recorded, you can quickly re-record it. So it's really cool. Have you used it, William?
Oh yes, and I would just like to say I urge everybody to go onto Planetphillip and watch your video comment on the audio comments. It's kind of hard to explain, but there's the banner there, and then you click the banner, and you go down to the video comments, and look at what Phillip looks like, and he is a hybrid of Steve Jobs and Gordon Freeman. Like, perfectly.
Morgan Freeman.
Gordon! Oh my god. I'm just going to quit right now.
Okay, well, I don't think that's true, but that'd be kind of cool if it was. But thank you for that. So, yes, look out for those audio and video comments. They're really, really good. Okay, next up is Vimeo. I have been uploading all our previous podcasts to Vimeo. Vimeo is very similar to YouTube, and we've decided to upload them there so that we give listeners another avenue to be able to listen to our show. It also gives you the opportunity that if you want to embed that into your website, you can do that. So that would be kind of cool if you do that. Thank you very much. The last reason is that eventually we hope to actually have a video cast. And if we've already been uploading to a video channel, then it will make a transition much, much easier. So the link will be on the sidebar of this podcast. So look out for those. Next up is, in fact, William should talk about this because this was William's idea, and this is called our podcast playing event. William, why don't you tell the listeners about this?
Right. At the end of the show, of every episode now, we're going to encourage people who are listening to join our Steam community. And myself and Phillip and Nick have already joined our Steam community. You can find it on Steam. It's just called Podcast17. And you go ahead and join it. And what we're going to do is we're going to encourage people to play a specific mod every week. So, for example, this week, and I'll restate it again at the end of the podcast, is going to be Suicide Survival, since we have Tobias on the show. We're going to encourage everybody to play Suicide Survival, and it'll give you guys a chance, the listeners, to play with us, the godly hosts of Podcast 17, and also play with each other, other listeners. So you join the group, and you can chat within the groups, most community-based stuff, but we're really trying to keep you guys close-knit together, and obviously play with each other in terms of Half-Life, not actually play with each other. Anyway, so join the Steam community. Steam community's name is Podcast17, and just go ahead and meet some friends. That's what it's all about, so that's all we have to say about that.
And in case anybody's wondering, yes, I will be joining the games. Even though I'm not a big MP fan, I will try. And you will have your chance to kill me, which is probably what most people want to do anyway. So you'll have a chance to do that online. Next up on the Podcast 17 news is, I mentioned earlier about hoping to eventually create a video cast. Well, if there are any listeners out there who have experience with that and maybe want to help us put something together, perhaps you play a lot of mods and you use Fraps or GameCam or one of the other recording softwares, and you want to help us maybe try and put something together, then contact us, please. I mean, that would be really cool. If we can start to get something like that going, that would be pretty cool. Okay, I think that's about it for the podcast news. I'll probably interject some other things later in the show, but it's probably time for William to take over with the follow-up.
Right. This week we have a few bits of follow-up and errata that I want to kind of talk about. First up on the list is Suicide versus Survivors. Suiciders versus Survivors. I just want to say that this game is awesome. Last week we mentioned it, and I didn't have a chance to play it, and I urge you all to go ahead and play it. But we're going to talk about this more in detail when we interview Tobias, who's the developer of Suicide versus Survivors. So I won't get too much into that. Next up on follow-up and errata, we have DavSub. I mentioned that last week too. I didn't get a chance to play that, and DavSub is awesome. I think, Phillip, you will love this mod. It's just a straight-up single-player mod, very linear, but extremely fun. It does have some side quests, and you have to go down different routes too. I mean, last week we had that conversation of different types of map layouts. But Phillip, you will really love DavSub. Did you get to play it yet? Have you put it on Planetphillip?
Yeah, it's on there, but I played it so long ago, and because I'm so old and I have a memory like a sieve, to be honest, I can't remember much about it. But I'm pretty sure I enjoyed it because I normally remember the mods that I hate.
Yeah, Errata based off of DavSub, though. Last week I said DavSub Source is out. It's not really. When I checked the DavSub Source site, I saw that they posted DavSub Gold Source and the DavSub Source ModDB profile, so it confused me. So DavSub Source is not out. Sorry for the confusion. And lastly, I just wanted to apologize for how strong we came off on Project Resident Evil and how much Emmanuel was bashing it, but it's totally not worth playing. Do not play what they have. It'll just frustrate you beyond belief. And I think we really have to specify mods that are not good on the show to deter people away from playing it. There's a couple survey comments about that, and I just wanted to clarify our stance on that.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that we shouldn't be talking about the bad mods, and I think now you mention it, that we have to be clear. We have to, because we have to steer people away from the things that will waste their time.
Your Evil Twin, just real quick back on DavSub, you mentioned when we were talking earlier that you remember playing some of the creator's other stuff. What other stuff has he made?
I'm pretty sure that he made quite a bunch of the maps for As Your Sheep and Point of View. I remember before you mentioning the fans of Point of View, the mod where you get to play as an alien slave. And As Your Sheep was the previous mod before that, where you a sort of alternative Blue Shift. It's a mod where you play as a security guard, but unlike Blue Shift, which was terribly short, As Your Sheep was gigantic.
I loved Azure Sheep. That's one of my favourite mods of all time for Half-Life 1. I thought it was great. Katie, or Kate, or whatever her name was, who was a female security guard, was quite difficult to manoeuvre a few times, and I didn't really like that aspect of it, but I thought it was a great one.
Those are, two very, very, very good Half-Life 1 mods, so it's good to see that the developers worked on those two as well, because it really shows how well DavSub is made. Anyway, we got some Half-Life news, and we were originally going to have Half-Life short stories on the show. However, their site seems to be down and they're having some technical difficulties, so we couldn't have them on today. But I do want to mention that they have their new episode. They've released a new episode to which their Half-Life short stories is going to be covering. So that's interesting to look at. Check out their ModDB profile. It's on the right-hand side of the links, obviously. And they have some new images up there as well. They mention a little bit about human error, which is their first official media release and everything. So check out the videos, check out the screenshots, and unfortunately we didn't have them on the show, but hopefully we can have them on the show next week or the weeks coming.
Yeah, I haven't followed this mod as much as I should do. I'll make sure that I sort of get more information on it, but I'm hoping that they're not going to just keep announcing new episodes without releasing anything. I don't know whether they got like a set schedule or not, but and I'm not sure the reason for announcing a new episode, but it looks interesting. I really like the idea of just having short stories instead of one big story, so let's wait and see.
I was checking out their website yesterday, and they have a small flash time-lapse thing where you can see how the maps are made for Half-Life short stories, and it's really interesting to see how they build up the map and how detailed they did all the map stuff. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, right now their website's down, but we'll definitely include the link on the show note links. I want to take a look at that as well. They said they updated a few things.
Oh, actually, I think their website is not down, it's moved. If you go to www.hlssmod.net, I think that is their website.
Oh yeah, that seemed to be working. So check out www.hlssmod.net for more information on Half-Life 2 short stories. And they do have that time-lapse thing up on there. That's very cool. Very cool, actually. Wow.
I think it's a great idea to do stuff like that, so other people can see how you build up a map or how it evolves or changes over time and playtests.
Right. Also gives other mappers some good ideas on how to develop their own maps too, and how to use orange textures properly. I know a lot of people don't really know how to use orange textures properly to, measure out their maps, but you could see it through this time-lapse video.
These kind of things would be perfect for tutorials as well.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, I remember back in the day there was a mod called Half-Life Quantum Leap, which had a whole series of different maps made by different people. There wasn't really a coherent story to the mod, it was a bunch of random maps in all different styles, of varying quality, and it was quite a blast to play. Because the thing is, people are unlikely to download just one single map, which they could finish in 10 or 15 minutes. So this way, it drew sort of attention to the work of a whole bunch of different mappers. And it's great to see that that this kind of thing is being done again for Half-Life 2.
Another project that just came to mind that runs on the same vein as that is on the Sven Co-op forums. I always mention Sven Co-op, but they decided to do a community map project where they take all the greatest mappers of Sven Co-op, and each person picks a certain part of the form and they map it. So we were actually, in essence, mapping the whole Sven Co-op form, but each person would have their own form board to map. So I had server boards, and other people had other or general discussion, the normal boards that you'd see. And then at the end, Jay Polito would take all those pieces and put them all together. And I submitted my part. I don't think they're done. Everybody's done with their parts yet, but it's going to be such an amazing project. They did it with a map called Rage Map. I don't know if anybody's heard of that either in Sven Co-op. And what they did is, it didn't have any theme, but they just took all their maps together and they kind of made a patched together map of a longer skew of things. And it was awesome. It was really fun.
I'm very confused by your comment that you've been mapping the Sven Co-op forum. I mean, will the final maps look like an internet forum? Are you running around on gigantic text? Or is it some kind of abstract representation of the forum?
Well, the idea is that since it's a community project, it's however you decide the forums look like if they were to be materialized. In my opinion, I did server board because I host servers. So the server board was essentially a giant server room, and you kind of had this objective where you had to protect the servers. Grunts would crash in through the ceilings. You had to protect the servers for a certain amount of time, and then once you did, you won the server board section. A lot of people are doing off-topic, like Keen and Turricane are doing the off-topic section where it's really, really obscure. You have random things just floating around, and there are form textures in there. It's just however you want to make it is however it'll work, and that's the beauty of doing a community project like that. I think in Half-Life Short Stories you'll see this as well. A whole bunch of people having their own ideas and then them putting together. It's going to be interesting to look at.
I think maybe I've misunderstood it, or maybe you've misunderstood it, but my understanding is that Half-Life Short Stories is a group of mappers making a mod that is just a short story. It's not essentially one mapper makes one story and then another mapper makes another one. It's just, instead of some big long story, it's just like mini episodes. At least that's my understanding. Going back to what you guys were saying earlier, that was the goal for Hollow Reality, which was a mod that I created with Cube Dude, to get as many different people to create any type of map possible and then put them together with a story that linked them in some way. A little bit like Quantum Leap, but there was no story behind that, and that was also for the Half-1 engine, whereas Hollow Reality was for Source, and it was hoping to get people to convert deathmatch maps and new mappers to try something small, but it didn't really take off, unfortunately.
I greatly prefer it when there is some kind of story hanging it together. I think the Half-Life Quantum Leap team did another one, Half-Life Issues, and they tried there to slightly create some kind of story where some scientist had gone missing through a teleporter, so you were jumping between lots and lots of different maps in order to find the lost scientist. And basically all it needed was that little bit of justification. Even when maps are totally different styles, different time periods, different planets, it's nice when there is something connecting them, rather than here is map number 14.
Yeah, one of my favourite mods of all time is a Half-Life 2 map called Offshore, and it's fantastic. It's made by one guy called Darrow. I'll have to check on that, sorry. I think his name is Darrow Lint or something like that, sorry. And My only problem with it, and it's a very, very long, it took me at least 15 hours to finish it, is that there's no story involved except the idea that you're escaping. And there's no voice acting, there's no other storytelling. And I got almost bored because I didn't have a motivation for doing what I'm doing anymore. And I think that that's really important, whether the mod is long or short. And I'm going to be talking about motivation when we talk about a map a little bit later.
All right, so those are really great points. Definitely keep your eye out on Half-Life short stories, and obviously check out the things that we've talked about before, Quantum Leap, and check out the Sven Co-op post about the SC_forums, that's what it's called, and Rage Map if you're a Sven Co-op fan. But these community projects are awesome. They keep maps going, because a lot of the time, if one person is working on a map, or one person is working on a project, they lose drive real quick. And the idea is that other people will motivate them to keep going. Or if you have some sort of deadline or people are depending on you, then that in itself is a drive to continue mapping. So even if you are working on a project, if you're a developer out there working on a mod by yourself, make sure you work with other people too, so that you have that drive and that motivation to work with others. And that's all I have to say about that. Anyway, our next bit of news topic is the Black Mesa Source trailer. This thing is orgasmic. It looks better than anything Valve could ever create. That's all I'm going to say. If you haven't seen it already, shame on you, and go watch it now. But this thing is awesome. Oh my god. Just the lighting involved and what to expect from this mod, they really are going to change Half-Life for me. Anyway, Phillip, what do you think of this?
Oh my god. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. And I keep saying this, but I really think it's going to reinvigorate the modding community once it's released. And we talked about this before, about whether they release their textures. I can't believe that they wouldn't do that. And if they do, then there's going to be hundreds of Black Mesa mods, which is going to make me so happy because I love the idea of that place. And they've done a fantastic job, very, very professional. So if anybody from the Black Mesa team is listening, I've emailed you. Or I've emailed your leader, please reply and come on the show. We want to talk about you.
Maybe the listeners can get involved. Maybe the listeners should go on the Black Mesa forums and start a petition to get them on Podcast 17. Actually, Nick makes a really good comment in chat, our producer, Nick. He said that Black Mesa was listed on GameTrailers.com, which is interesting because you don't see mods on there either. And I frequent Kotaku as well, and they even posted this trailer on Kotaku. So the big sites that have nothing to do with Half-Life, are posting about Black Mesa Source. And that is crazy. This is just a whole new way of reporting news for mods. You do not see this with normal mods. It's insane how much PR this mod is getting.
I'm hoping it's going to have the same effect that Counter-Strike had as well. It's really going to sort of change the way we think about things, and hopefully we do things in a different, much more professional way.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm incredibly looking forward to Black Mesa. The one problem with a project such as Black Mesa is that because it is so hotly anticipated, they've got to make every aspect so totally perfect. Otherwise, people are, some fans are going to be complaining or nitpicking about certain things, while, a totally new mod, with a new story of its own, people would just appreciate in its own right. But in this case, they've got to live up to the legacy of original Half-Life, and, people are expecting it to be, better and more fun than the game they originally played back in 1998.
If I may add this as an art student and raise my critical voice, just don't forget that awesome graphics and game trailers does not equal good gameplay or just fun to play. I think that's something people tend to forget.
I don't think they should have too much to worry on that front, because if they are truly recreating the original Half-Life 1 gameplay, then that should stand in its own right, because Half-Life 1 is still fun to play. There are certain aspects which are slightly odd, like rescuing a bunch of scientists and security guards, and they follow you around, and then you've got to climb up a lift shaft, and they just stand there and make no comment and don't care, or say, "I'm not taking another step." So hopefully they've got some slightly improved, little sequences, so it doesn't seem quite so daft when you abandon survivors. But apart from that, the Half-Life 1 gameplay, stands up, pretty well by today's standards.
Yeah, I have to agree on that.
I think it's always also worth considering that I wonder how many people will play this mod who have never played Half-Life 1, because I'm pretty sure that there's quite a few people out there who have Half-Life 2 but haven't played Half-Life 1. I mean, I don't have any exact figures, but I think that that's the case. And a lot of people won't be comparing it to the original Half-Life 1 because they haven't played it.
Or even Half-Life Source. You know, Valve did their own version of Half-Life Source, and I haven't even played that. I played it for a little bit, but then I said, you know, what's the point? There's not much here that separates this from the original Half-Life, except for, yeah, it has the physics engine, yeah, it has different models. I mean, even the textures were pretty much the same. So I can't wait to play Half-Life in the Source engine, because I've never fully done it yet. Whereas people, you know, other people feel the same way as me. Like Nick just said, I prefer Half-Life to Valve's Half-Life Source, too. Even though Valve, the original Half-Life is 10 years old, it's way better than the Source version. It just feels more natural to me.
Also, Half-Life Source had a bunch of problems. For instance, helicopters were incredibly easy to kill. In regular Half-Life, they were bulletproof, except for a couple of spots, and it took a lot of bullets to take them down. In Half-Life Source, they're not bulletproof, so while you're intended to take them down with the rocket launcher or the towel cannon, you can just take out your pistol, and two magazines of pistol bullets will take down an Apache helicopter, which is a bit daft. And you can also get yourself locked out of the anomalous materials lab after the experiment. If you decide to go out the door, it can close behind you and you can get stuck. So Half-Life Source, you know, isn't an ideal way to play Half-Life if you haven't played it before. If someone's new to Half-Life, it's best they play regular old Half-Life, because if they play Half-Life Source, they'll get a slightly wonky experience.
Yeah, you can't upgrade some parts and not others. Does anybody know why Valve released it like that?
In my own mind, they wanted to, appeal to the younger players. Because I used to work at a gaming center, and I tried to encourage people to play Half-Life, and they said, "Oh no, I never want to play Half-Life. That's 10 years old." But they're probably more likely to play Half-Life Source because it's new. You know, it's that mentality that kids have nowadays. I think that's what Valve thought. If they released Half-Life Source, then new generations of players were more likely to get in the Half-Life franchise. But on the same vein of that, you should never release a game that is subpar to the original. I mean, it just totally demoralizes the original game. If somebody played Half-Life Source, they would have such a bad idea, and it would be such a bad representation of the original Valve creation that it might even deter them away from playing Half-Life 2 or any of the subsequent episodes.
Wasn't it also that the original Half-Life wasn't compatible with Steam? I mean, it was based on the one or something like that system.
Well, Valve got the regular Half-Life working pretty well in Steam. I don't think Half-Life Source was released because of problems of Half-Life in Steam. It works perfectly fine.
So that's the reader's task this week. Find out and tell us why Valve released Half-Life Source.
Well, I've got my own idea on that. I seem to remember some comment that they wanted to find out what mod teams would have to go through. You know, Half-Life mod teams, switching to using the Source engine in Half-Life 2. So they decided that they would redo Half-Life 1 for the Source engine and find out what's involved in that. And then once they'd done it, they thought, oh, well, we might as well release that. Originally, it was just a bonus if you bought the special edition of Half-Life 2, but eventually they sold it separately.
Maybe I'm looking into this a little bit too deeply, but another reason why Valve might have released Half-Life Source would to deter people away from recreating Half-Life in Source, even though Black Mesa Source already did it. But maybe the idea was, if we create Half-Life Source, there would be no reason for people to recreate Half-Life in Source. And maybe they just didn't want people fooling around with their own IPs.
Nah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see that as a reason, because they didn't really create it in Source. They just made it compatible with the Source engine and added a few bits and bobs like the water and, as you say, physics engine. So I wouldn't have said that they recreated it in Source.
I have to agree with Philip on this one because I think it's not possible to like modify the original Half-Life so it would work on Steam.
Do you mean Source, Tobias?
Yeah, because I mean, when you make mods for Half-Life, you don't have access to all the stuff. Like you have access to a lot of stuff that's being done for you or parsed over the code, so you can't use all the details Valve on their side have.
Right. Anyway, moving right along. DreamBall 1.2 is released. Has anybody ever played DreamBall? You know, I played this 1.2, and I had a good time. The controls were a little bit wonky, and I got a little bit frustrated, but once I got over that, you know, it was kind of fun. I like playing Marble Madness, and this game is exactly like Marble Madness, where you move a marble across some wooden platforms. You try to get to the exit, kind of like a labyrinth, so to speak. And it's just something interesting going on with the Source engine that a lot of people aren't doing. I like seeing originality.
I played it. I think they should rename it Nightmare Ball. Not because I hated it, but because I just couldn't do it. I wasn't very good. I found it really frustrating the way the camera angle changed, and when the camera angle changed, you had to change which button you used. And I just think, why can't they pull a little bit further away and keep the camera angles still? But maybe that's just how they did it. It was very good. It was very interesting. It was good to see something new, but it only held my attention for 1.5 levels because I kept falling off on the second one, and I thought, oh man, I can't do this anymore.
Even if it only held your attention for 1.5 levels, or you played it through like I did. I mean, it only took me like 20 minutes to play it through. And it's supposed to be this polished, perfect game. Well, I'm never going to play the levels again. There's only about 5 levels in there. And I don't think it would be that hard to make more levels. So it really only has a lasting appeal of 20 minutes. And then after that, you know, you're left with, okay, what do I do now?
This is where the community needs to make their own levels for it, I suppose. Because if they don't, then you're right. Then it's finished. Once you've played it. That's it.
Yeah, I even went to the site to look on their forums for more maps, and alas, there were none. So I think, and what Tobias is doing right now, which again we will get to, I think what the developers have to do is encourage the community to make maps and release a proper SDK and tell people how to create maps for DreamBall, because I'm sure it is a little bit different. I mean, it's a totally different idea, it's a totally different reality of gameplay, but you know, people aren't taking hold of that.
Yeah, you need to encourage people. You need to convince them that that's what they need to do. I think a mod like this would benefit from having some kind of stats, which would be something like fastest time, and then maybe fluidity, you know, whether you've gone too far to one side or too far to the edge. Probably some other technical stats that they could do. That might make people play more. There'd be like speed runs that they could do, and then mappers would, you know, create maps that were specifically designed for speed runs and stuff.
Nick has just let us know in chat that the developer has commented about the camera, and he says he has a good programmer to fix it. So it is being fixed. He's aware of the issue. So maybe the listeners out there want to hold out till DreamBall 1.3, I guess, when the camera's fixed, or whenever they fix that camera, because it is extremely frustrating. But I thought I'd mention that. Just another release of the week. The Black Mess demo was released as well this week. This wasn't that great. I played it. Philip, did you play it?
Yes, and let me just tell all listeners now, don't waste your time. It's not worth playing. Maybe the final mod will be, but this is just a complete waste of time. I actually think that the person developing this is in some way connected to the City 17 guy, because some of those models are exactly the same. So maybe that they've got something going. But really, we must do everything we can to discourage mappers from releasing these kind of things, because it doesn't benefit anybody. If you want beta testing, then on Planetphillip, I have a beta testing team specifically for SP mods who have got lots of experience, different quality computers, different quality skill levels. You can have a private beta, but releasing this is a complete waste of everybody's time, including yours.
I 100% agree. There's only 2 levels, and just to be clear, this is Black Mess. not Black Mesa. I got so many comments on Steam when I went to play this game. 100 people messaged me, and they said, "You're playing the Black Mesa demo?" I was like, no, it says Black Mess, not Black Mesa. So, just to clarify. Also, there's 2 levels here. The first level is horrible, absolutely horrible. The second level is a little bit better than the first level, but still pretty bad. I got through the demo, and I got through the demo a little bit relieved that I didn't have to play any more of it. It was a little bit entertaining. If you like playing everything like I do and like Phillip does, then by all means go ahead and play it, just to fill your ego like we do. But if you have a limited amount of time in the day and you're not one of those guys who have to play everything like we are, then just totally avoid it.
Yeah, I got confused about the name too, and which is also something to remind other people who are making mods to pick a name that's unique and who isn't used by other games or projects, and also something that's that's new.
I was thinking maybe it was supposed to be a bit tongue-in-cheek. Everyone's heard of Black Mesa, the facility rather than necessarily the remake mod. And so it's not the Black Mesa facility, it's Black Mess. I think he was going for that bit of name recognition, but maybe that's slightly backfiring in a few cases.
Well, it was a little unfortunate because, the Black Mesa trailer was released the same day that the Black Mesa demo was released, so that confusion was there too. Anyway, moving right along, some piece of good news that came out this week was the Decadence Dev Kit. I've been following this mod, and they kind of release a little bit, they have media releases every couple weeks. And what Decadence is it's a story-driven multiplayer modification that's kind of set in the steampunk future. So if you like games like Fallout or other steampunk genre games, then this is definitely going to be a mod for you. It is multiplayer, but the images of this mod look absolutely amazing. The weapons are truly unique. It kind of reminds me of a little bit of Dystopia, but more steamy than just cyberpunk. And what they did was they released the dev kit. So if you are interested in this mod, and if you're a developer, you can go ahead and sign up on the forums to become a contributor. And you can learn how to make custom apps. The mod isn't even out yet, but what they're doing is they're opening it up to developers so that they can go ahead and create more maps, so when it is released they have a huge plethora. And Natural Selection did this when the original Natural Selection came out. They opened up their dev kit for people on the forums, and what it allowed more people to create maps, so when they released, there was a whole bunch of different types of maps and a whole bunch of unique ideas instead of the same thing for the first 2 months of release. So check this out, because this mod looks awesome, and if you are a developer, this might be something that interests you.
I wish Black Mesa Source would do that, release some of the assets that they have so that people can start making mods of the mod.
Right, or even just basically levels. I'm not sure if Black Mesa Source will have multiplayer like the original Half-Life did, just a straight-up multiplayer deathmatch. But it would be cool to see some levels in the multiplayer aspect of it.
Oh, Black Mesa definitely has the recreation of Half-Life Deathmatch. If you go on the website, you can see screenshots from the remakes of the old Half-Life 1 Deathmatch maps.
Wonderful. That excites me greatly.
But yeah, I really like what Decadence is doing here, and it would be cool if projects like Black Mesa would share their assets. I doubt they'd want to share actual in-progress levels, because the idea is for the game to surprise people to a certain extent when it eventually comes out. But it would be great if they released textures or models, this sort of standard office furniture, or Black Mesa health charges, things like that. That kind of thing would really sort of jumpstart the community. But alas, it's all under lock and key. Perhaps it's because Decadence is more of a multiplayer focused than Black Mesa, which is mainly single player focused. So they want a bigger surprise.
Yeah, and also Decadence is kind of keeping it. They are saying that they have the dev kit released, but at the same time you have to go through a complicated process of going through their forums, getting on the dev forums, and then getting the dev kit and reading through the tutorials. So they are opening it up, but in essence, what they're doing is they're opening it up to the elite. They're not just saying, here's a file front link, go ahead and download the dev kit. They're saying, get up on our forums, register on our website, get to know the people, and then you can have the dev kit, so to speak.
That's a perfect way of doing it. You're right. You don't just want to distribute everything and then let people steal your work. You want to make sure that what you're doing is for the benefit of the mod, and that seems like a fair way, that if you want something, you have to give something back by joining the community. Seems very fair to me.
I 100% agree. So that's that. The next bit of news we got today is Berimbau. Maybe somebody can correct me on the pronunciation of this. Berimbau. I think that's how you say it. Anyway, what it is it's just a sword fighting mod for Source, and it looks really cool. I watched their trailer here, and I always like these types of things where it's kind of a third-person Source, dojo type fighting thing. The Specialist kind of did this, and there's another mod too. But this game looks really, really cool. I can't wait to play it. And they've been releasing a lot of media lately. I've been keeping an eye on them on ModDB. And, they're really pumping out a lot of things over the past couple of weeks. So it's a good sign. If you haven't heard of this mod, check it out. Go to their ModDB page, look at their screenshots, and watch the trailer that they just released a couple days ago. Did you guys look at the trailer?
Yeah, I did. It looks fun. I like the look of it. What I really want to do is I want to play it with a Wii controller, though, because for me, sword fighting has to be like a physical thing. So if this was available via the Wii, then maybe I'd try it.
Well, I was going to say is, what do you think of mod developers porting their things to the retail engines, so to speak? Do you think modding is a good starting place for most developers out there? I think it is, personally.
Absolutely. I think lots of people, and it's probably happening now much more than it did in the past, is that people start by modding. And Tobias is a perfect example. He's going to his university and he's studying this and he's making his mods, and I have little doubt that he will be in the game design industry, as many, many people are that have come through modding. What I'd like to take the idea off a tangent, though, is that too often we see the reverse engineering, and a good example of that is the Mirror's Edge, where you have the game and then somebody tries to make it for Source, for example. And I'm not sure that there's that much benefit to the community in that. Yes, from an individual point of view, maybe you learn a lot by trying to steal somebody's idea and recreating it, but I'm not sure it's good for the community as a whole.
Right, I agree with that as well. But Berimbau, Berimbau, I think that's how you say it, looks awesome. I will definitely play this mod, and when it gets released, I can't wait to play it with the listeners. Because I like these types of sword fighting things. I like just sitting in a mod and not shooting. I like casually thinking about my moves and how I'm going to approach my enemy, that sort of thing. Instead of just, headshot, headshot. Maybe I've been playing a little bit too much Prince of Persia. But that's just how I feel. Alright, next on our list. Of course, we're going to go on to the releases of Planetphillip. And why don't you tell us about some of these, Phillip?
Okay, well, first up is a map called Scary Map, which is by the same author, Dark Pivot, who made Train Station. He made this one earlier, I believe. Unfortunately, it shows a lot of potential, but it's really just a series of unconnected rooms. And as I said on Planetphillip, it has this beginner feel about it. It's so much about the coloured lighting and the sort of jumping between areas with no connection. The enemies all grouped together. I've definitely seen worse. It's worth playing. How much you'll enjoy it, I don't know, but I have seen a lot worse. So that's the first one. You've played it, haven't you, William?
Oh yeah, I played it, and there are some interesting concepts that the developer Dark Pivot is going through. He clearly is taking some ideas from Fear and other scary-based retail AAA titles and putting them into a mod, which you don't see a lot. I mean, spoiler alert, here we go. You go through a room, and when you enter the room, the barrels and the crates kind of have a movement of their own, like somebody invisible is going through them and pushing them away from the side. And I don't think you see that sort of thing enough in the Half-Life series. So things like that are interesting, and there's a lot of psychological fears that he's putting into you. Like, you'll get randomly teleported into an area, that at first means nothing to you, and then you get attacked right away. So it doesn't matter that you know nothing about the area. You just have to worry about surviving, and then immediately after you get teleported back to the same area, and you're going back and forth, and it really messes with your mind. And that's another kind of scare tactic that a lot of developers do. And it's nice to see that this map isn't just about, blam, up in your face, scare you. Instead, it's more psychological, kind of like Silent Hill.
I really enjoyed the beginning. The beginning is a bit of a rush, but it kind of went a little downhill after that for me. But definitely got potential, and as I said before, that this is a good example of a mapper who probably needs to be part of a team to really speed up his development. On his own, he's got these little ideas, but he hasn't really managed to put them together in a whole, and that's where having being part of a community and making maps with other people would be really good for him and benefit him a lot. Okay, next up is a map called Blockwork. I was really looking forward to this because it's basically a puzzle mod, but unfortunately I was pretty disappointed. I posted it on the website today, which is Sunday, and I've been really quite hard on it, and I've been quite hard on it not because it's bad, but because probably I was expecting more from it. There's no motivation for me to do any of the puzzles, and as I mentioned earlier on in the show, I want to talk about motivation. It's a spoiler alert now. Basically, you have 4 ragdolls, and each puzzle you need to kill 3 of them and leave 1 alive. The one that you need to live is called Anne, and she happens to be Alex. And I don't know why they changed the name or why the author changed the name, but they're ragdolls. They're not alive, they're not making any movements, they're not saying anything. And for me, it got boring very quickly because I'm thinking, why am I trying to kill these people and keep Anne alive when she seems dead already?
I think that would be a great concept for psychological conflicts of who you leave alive. Let's say the people are trapped inside a box or a glass box, and you see them, they want to go out, and they scream, let me out, and you have the power to decide who gets to live and who not. I mean, I think that's a pretty interesting concept.
That kind of reminds me of Saw, and it'd be really interesting if somebody created a Saw multiplayer mod where you're trapped in a room with, I guess, 3 other people and, multiplayer components, and essentially one of you have to sacrifice each other in order for, one person to survive, or you have to go through all these puzzles and stuff, and you have to sacrifice the lives of others, and being smart too. Sacrifice them without them knowing, so to speak, for your own survival. I think that'd be really cool, psychological thrillers like that.
There was a Half-Life 2 mod, Causality Effect, where time was messed up by the teleportation at the beginning of Half-Life 2. And you sort of jump around in time and space throughout the mod, and then at the end there's a sort of boss fight, and who you kill during the final sequence gives you different endings. And so it actually turned out that you had to kill some characters, supposedly the goodies, in order to save the world, because it turned out that they betrayed you or something along those lines, which is quite surprising. And it wasn't so much a puzzle, but it was kind of working along those lines.
I'm not sure I'm supposed to mention this, but I won't mention the developer's name, but I have a mod called... In fact, I better not even mention the name. It's not been released, and I don't know what plans he has to release it, but basically it's this idea where you have to listen to people in the mod and decide whether they're telling the truth, and you have to kill some people or not kill other people, and each time it's a little bit different, and it's a very clever way of manipulating the player's choices and giving them these moral dilemmas. So if the developer is listening, please finish this mod and release it, because it's definitely worth the community playing it.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that immediately reminds me of the ship. I mean, I haven't played much of that mod, but that seems exactly as what the ship is, only in single-player form. I think that'd be really cool.
Yes, it's very good. It has lots of replayability as well, because there's sort of only slightly different choices, but things happen at different times, and it's very good. It's very interesting.
So anyway, Philip, would you suggest that people play Blockwork?
If you're patient, yes, because to be honest, I got bored with the third or the fourth puzzle because it was so agonizingly slow, and the developer pissed me off a little because I tried to jump to one side and I got stuck, and then I fell in the liquid and I died, and I felt that in a puzzle mod, dying just because I was exploring didn't seem quite right, so I wasn't quite happy with that. If you're patient, try it.
Earlier, Philip, you commented on the lack of motivation in the mod, and the thing is, some people might reckon a puzzle mod, maybe you don't need motivation, perhaps the puzzles themselves are motivation enough, but it depends. Different gamers have different attitudes. I remember there was one mod for Half-Life 1, I remember Residual Point, which was, I found, a very enjoyable mod. It was massive in size, it was very hard, it was very challenging, but effectively had no ending. And so what had been a really enjoyable experience, I felt really let down at the end, as if I'd wasted my time, despite the fact that I'd just spent, I had in fact enjoyed the game while playing through it. So I think it's important for mod developers to keep motivation in mind, that you have some kind of goal that you're working towards.
I'm looking at Andrew Dobbs' personal website, and looking at his other creations on his personal work and his teamwork, so to speak. It's kind of interesting to see Blockwork on this list, because it's a little bit less than what he, in terms of quality, than what he's developed before. So I think what Blockwork is about is more about the scripts and what's going on behind the scenes instead of what the game looks like. Would you say that, Philip? Would you say it's astounding in terms of the scripting and how he manages multi-managers and triggers and functions and everything?
Well, I can only comment from a player's point of view because I can't make mods. My mapping experience is very, very, very limited. But what I can tell you from the player's point of view is that some of those puzzles aren't really even puzzles. They're just not random events, that's the wrong word, but I mean some of them can be solved by trial and error, moving this material to this box, and one of them I managed to do first time, and I don't think you should be able to do any puzzle first time by just guessing. There needs to be some element, some communication between the mod itself and the mapper, and the player, and maybe the author was experimenting and stuff with, as you say, multi-managers and these things, but from a player's point of view, that doesn't make any difference, and I don't care about those things. I care about what I've got, and if he releases it, then it should be released interesting for me. I don't mean to sound rude, I don't mean to be, and I have a huge respect for anybody who releases anything, but from a player's point of view, don't release a technical thing if it doesn't interest the player.
Well, that's good. That's very good comments, though. That's what it's all about. Anyway, I think it's time to move on to our interviews, and this week we have Tobias from Suicide Survival. So, I'm just going to ask you straight up, explain what Suicide Survival is for anybody who hasn't played it.
Alright, it's a mod for Half-Life 2. It's a 2-team-based mod where one team gets to blow themselves up and the other team gets to try not to get blown up by the other team, and tries to hide or just tries to survive. The team who can blow themselves up, they look like normal props in a map. In this game, for example, they look like shrubberies or pot plants. And there are a lot of pot plants on the map, so if they don't move, the other team can't see who of the pot plants is a player and who's just a prop in the map. So it requires a bit of waiting and tactics, when to move and when not to move. And the suiciders, the guys who play the props, they just can blow themselves up, and that's about it. And the survivors, they are gardeners in this game, who don't look like gardeners, but they really are. And they can throw gardening books at the bushes in order to prevent them from blowing up. So yeah, and they have just basically try to survive, while others try to blow them to get as close as they can and to blow themselves up.
Awesome.
I've got to say that is a genius concept.
You know, when we were talking about this last week, I didn't know anything about this mod, and we had somebody on the show, I believe it was Thomas, who played it, and he tried explaining it to us. And the idea, you have two concepts here. The first concept is that you have, in its most basic form, suiciders versus survivors. And it doesn't matter, you know, what they look like. It's just basically there's these survivors, and they're trying to avoid the suiciders, and the suiciders are trying to blow up the survivors. But then you throw on this extra element where it's about gardening, and the two have nothing to do with each other. But for some reason, they work so well. So where did you even think of the idea to use bushes and gardeners in such a horrific and gruesome game?
I have to maybe get into more detail about that, because the idea for this mod I got from another mod. It was called Suicide Barrels, and it was a mod for Gary's mods, and it was very old, like 2007 or so, and nobody was playing it, and I thought the concept of this game is pretty genius, and so I used it as a part of the lecture course I had in school, and modified it. And at some point I figured exploding barrels isn't gonna work very good, and it needs to be changed in something else. And I just picked the first thing that came to my mind, which was shrubberies. And I also picked shrubberies because you don't expect shrubberies to blow up.
That's awesome. This game is so funny. Like, when you're playing with friends, it's just so ridiculously hilarious. And when you're playing with other people that you don't even know, the community has really taken off, and there's a lot of people who are extremely interested in this mod and stick with it. Another question I wanted to ask is, I wanted to kind of tie this into what you're learning in school, because like I've stated before, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who want to get into game design. Does your school encourage you creating this mod, or are you doing this mod for a sort of project or something?
Well, I have to say, normally in school they don't like you using game engines and modifying them, because for a couple of reasons. Yeah, and it's also more work than using, like in our case, Unity 3D. And my professor, my lectures, they said, yeah, I mean, we're not happy if you use Source Engine, because it's a lot of work, and it looks like Half-Life 2 if you use it, and you have to modify everything, so we accept what work you do. And I was like pretty stubborn and said, yeah, okay, I will do it. I will replace everything, and yeah, and in the end they were pretty surprised at how it turned out. Yeah.
Yeah, you certainly proved them wrong, which is, in my opinion, this is one of the greatest mods in a couple months, to be honest. It's so original and so fun to play. I think Evil Twin was alluding to my next question, and this was immediately something I thought of when I first played Suicide Survivors, and I think a lot of people are thinking this as well, is do you have any plans to move this past shrubs? For example, is there any plans for the mod to allow mappers to choose their own specific models to be the suiciders and their own specific models to be the survivors, in the sense where, say, if a mapper wanted to have a filing cabinet room, or like you said, a barrel room, they could do that. They could just choose the prop and choose the survivor, and it would pretty much be done all for any concept that the mapper could think of.
Yeah, that's the idea I'm following. But the problem is, if you replace, like, let's say you replace the shrubbery, you also have to replace the sound files, because if you turn it into a refrigerator or something like that, and then they walk around and sound like bushes rattling, that's not gonna work. So it requires a lot of detailed thinking of how to make it as easy as possible for mappers to exchange the content. But that's an idea I want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I like your suggestion of a refrigerator. I'm imagining a map which is a kitchen showroom, completely full of fridges and dishwashers and washing machines and cookers, and have suiciders, not just one model. They could be disguised as anything, as a fridge, as a washing machine, as a dishwasher, amongst all the rows of other appliances. That could be a laugh.
Yeah, I mean, the possibilities are endless, and you opening it up to the mappers, sort of what we talk about all the time, mods of mods, will really increase the longevity of your mod. Which brings me to my next question, and my final question before we hand it over to Phillip. What are you doing to encourage your community to stay active in the mod? I'm going to I'm going to play the devil's advocate, and I might scare you a little bit here, but hopefully it'll bring in some discussion. I see a lot of mods like this spring up, and they're really, really, really great. But unfortunately, they die out because either people lose interest or it doesn't get the proper PR. So what do you plan on doing to encourage the community to either A, create more maps, or yourself, B, create more updates? What do you have in plan for the future?
Well, honestly, I didn't think much about that. The main concept I want to do is to enable mappers to exchange props and exchange content, which is also more work for them. But I think that will generate a lot of more maps and generate more interest. Apart from that, I didn't think much about this part. Yeah. I mean, I want to try to keep it as simple as possible, and to make. I don't want to make it complicated, and I want to release often, so it will be more interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I noticed in the original release of Suicide Survivors, you had orange maps. There was the greenhouse map, which is the main map that everybody plays, and then there's two other maps that were originally orange textured. Were you planning on keeping those orange textured and getting to them later, or did the popularity of the mod force you to essentially release those maps a couple days later in the new map pack that's out?
Well, they weren't supposed to be released with the 1.0 release, so that's an error on my side. But the map pack I released, there are just like I redone the maps and completed them, because the original, they were just test maps and they didn't have the proper ammunition boxes, and they weren't like how do you say? They were like completed for public play. Yeah.
Very cool.
Okay, so I have a few questions. Some of them might seem really, really stupid, but they're from the point of view from somebody who's never played any MP stuff before. So I'm hopefully going to be helping some of the listeners out there who probably want some of these questions asked, but maybe were too afraid to ask them. First of all, why books? Why are we throwing books at the shrubs? Why not a pair of clippers to sort of chop the heads off the bushes? So why books?
There you have to go into the story of the mod. There's a little story involved, which basically goes like this. The shrubs are just like normal pot plants, and on one day they decide, well, we want to be free. We don't want to be pot plants anymore. They're starting a rebellion, and the gardeners are basically using knowledge to fight this rebellion, and thus they throw gardening for beginners books at them. And in the beginning I didn't know, like 4 days or 2 days before I had to finish the game, I didn't know what weapon they should use, and I asked a lot of people and they all said, yeah, well, use gardening scissors, or use the anti bug spray or something like that. And I always say, no, that's just too stereotypical, and because that's what people expect. I mean, if you have gardeners, we expect them to throw gardening scissors or to trim the bushes, and I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be something new, something unexpected.
Okay, no, that's good. I just was curious, and maybe once I start playing, I'll figure that out for myself. Now, when I join a server, what happens? Do I choose a side? Do I choose to be a survivor or a suicide? And how long do we play for? Is it for a time limit, or how often people get killed, or what happens there?
Right now it's totally depending on whatever you want. If you join a server, the server puts you in a team, depending on which team has the less players, and then you play. But you can change team at any time, so whatever you want. There's no team balancing function implemented right now. There's also no time limit, unless the server himself sets a time limit for the map.
I think the whole absence of the team balancing is good because it allows people to gang up on one survivor, and that makes for an interesting gameplay in the mod. So I kind of urge you right now to do not include team balancing, or at least have it as a CVAR that can be switched.
Okay, so what you're saying is that I join, I start playing, and you just keep playing until you've had enough. There's no rounds, there's no map movements. Just play until you're bored.
Exactly, that's the status quo.
And that's what makes this mod so beautiful, to be honest. I mean, you jump in a server, and there's just people blowing themselves up, and people come and go. It's just really that simple. It's awesome.
How many survivors, does there have to be? I mean, obviously there has to be a minimum of one, but I mean, what you said earlier, William, are you saying that there can be like 50 suiciders and then just one survivor?
Yeah, if the maximum players is 32, so there could be like 31 suiciders and one survivors, which makes the gameplay pretty fun for the survivor.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to playing this. It's gonna be the playing event of the week, so I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna see what happens. I'm open-minded, but it sounds like it's fun, and it's definitely very creative as well.
If I may to add on this, the idea is to do in the next release or the release after that, to make the game concept round-based, like in the beginning of the game. One person gets picked as suicide and everybody else is survivor, and they have to try to survive for like 10 minutes or something like that. And if they get killed by the suicider, they switch teams. So until nobody is left of the survivors, then the suiciders win. Or if one or more people of survivors are left until the time runs out, the survivors win.
I know everybody's got their own ideas for what they should do, but I'd love to see, instead of pot plants or shrubs, I'd love to see the jalopy from episode 2, like in a huge car lot, and there's like hundreds of these cars, and some of them are alive, and almost they come and try and run you over. That would be kind of cool.
Exploding cars.
Yeah, that would be awesome. All right, so why don't you tell us the site and where people can download it, and then we can move on.
It should be linked on the podcast webpage, and otherwise it's suicidesurvival.2ndsky.ch.
And of course, that'll be in the show notes, like Tobias has said.
I was just going to say, that's a bit of a mouthful, that web address.
I know I haven't gotten around to register a .com domain, so I'm gonna do that sometime later.
You better do it before somebody else gets it before you. That'd be really bad.
True that.
I'm doing it now. I'm gonna sell it to you for $100, Tobias.
All right.
All right, so our second last item on the agenda, and this is our discussion topic. We're kind of running out of time, so hopefully this can be short, but I just wanted to mention it. Valve has released their lifetime retail sales for like the whole Half-Life franchise. And this is amazing because a lot of developers don't really do this because they don't want to show in which direction they're moving, and they definitely don't release lifetime retail sales. The interesting thing here, though, is that this does not include digital distribution, which is obviously Valve's main platform for deploying Half-Life 2 and everything subsequent of Half-Life 2. So just reading off some of the stats here, 9.3 million units of Half-Life have been sold on retail. That's since 1998. And Blue Shift sold 1.1 million. Opposing Force sold 1.1 million, and Blue Shift sold 800,000 units. So clearly Blue Shift is the loser in terms of numbers sold, but Half-Life with 9.3 million. Anyway, Counter-Strike sold 4.2 million. Condition Zero sold 2.9 million. It's interesting to see that Condition Zero beat out Blue Shift. It is considered the worst of the two. And 2.1 million Counter-Strike Source. So Condition Zero even sold more copies than Counter-Strike Source, which is crazy. Half-Life 2 released 6.5 million. Episode 1 sold 1.4 million. And I don't think... Oh, they go down talking about the orange box here, too. I can't see... Oh. The orange box completely sold 3 million units at retail. So Episode 2, Portal, and TF2 together sold 3 million units. And, of course, Left 4 Dead, we're getting in those numbers now. But that's going to be another high count. So, in total, published retail figures total 32.8 million units sold. And projected is going to be around 36 million for Left 4 Dead. That's crazy amount of numbers coming from Valve. That really just shows what they're about.
I've got to say, with the figures for Episode 1, which seem quite low, I'm pretty sure Episode 1 was mainly sold online on Steam far more than any of the other games. Because, Orange Box, was a collection of a whole bunch of games, so people might have been more likely to buy that retail in the shops. But Episode 1 was just one game on its own without any real bonus, and it was heavily advertised on Steam to anyone that plays Half-Life 2. So I'm sure a lot of people just bought it on Steam and didn't bother going out and getting a disc of it.
Having said that, though, Alexander, the 1.4 was retail. That was all. It doesn't say how many were sold via Steam.
Oh no, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it'd be very interesting to see the digital figures, because although Episode 1 seems to lose out in the retail figures compared to Half-Life 2 or the Orange Box, I think if you looked at the digital figures, I think Episode 1 would be one of the biggest digital sellers.
Okay, yeah, I see your point. I'm very curious to know how many people bought Episode 2 outside of the Orange Box, and maybe they'll release them eventually. But and I wonder how many people bought Episode 1 via Steam as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to look at the digital distribution numbers if they ever do release those. I mean, they don't have to. They're really just releasing these to say, like, hey, look at our awesome numbers. This is why we're the best. But comparing Episode 1 to Episode 2 is going to be interesting, to say the least. One thing that I'm reading through the comments on Game of Sutra, and I check Game of Sutra quite often, and somebody says it's a shame that Goofman and Cliffy only got paid $250,000 each for Counter-Strike. So Valve really only dropped $500,000 for the Counter-Strike IP, but they released 2.9 million, 2.1 million, and then, the original sold a whole bunch to 4.2 million in itself. So the amount of money they got, it's definitely a bargain on Valve's part.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a mod maker and somebody says to me, hey, you want 250k for your mod, I'd be like, yeah, okay, thanks very much. I'm actually quite surprised that the low number, I say low, it's all relative, of Counter-Strike Source. 2.1 million seems quite low. I always assumed that Counter-Strike Source was just played and bought much more than any of the other games that they made. I wonder if those type of people are a little bit more into piracy than the others.
I recently saw a statistic who showed which game multiplayer players played the most, and Counter-Strike Source was at the top, when followed by Team Fortress, and it exceeded Team Fortress 2 by about 4 times the amount of Team Fortress 2, so that's really crazy numbers.
So if you think of it that way, I mean, obviously, like we keep stating, we're not taking in digital distribution, but Team Fortress 2 took in more retail units than Counter-Strike Source. So if the digital distribution numbers mirror this, saying that even still Orange Box sells more units than Counter-Strike Source, then Phillip, you're essentially correct in saying that piracy does have a big factor in this, if people are saying Counter-Strike Source is the #1 multiplayer game.
I'd be surprised by that, because I'd have thought playing multiplayer games pirate would be quite tricky. I thought playing Counter-Strike Source, it's designed for the Steam system. I'd have find it hard to imagine there were that many people playing it using some kind of pirate independent system.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, I've never really tried pirating Counter-Strike Source. I don't know how difficult that is to get online, or even getting online on any Steam game. I think it is fairly difficult. I mean, we remember the whole fiasco with BioShock, and BioShock on Steam.
Yeah, I think you're right, Alexander. I mean, I must be wrong that they can't pirate it and play online. And of course, one of the things is that you have to play online, don't you, with Counter-Strike Source? I mean, it's that kind of game, whereas Half-Life or the episodes, yeah, maybe you're online, but you're not playing online. And I don't know how Valve differentiate between those two things. And you have to be playing all the time.
Also, the high sales figures of Counter-Strike versus Counter-Strike Source is because Counter-Strike is an old game and it will run on weaker computers. So there's lots of people that don't have what would be considered gaming computers, but they can still play Counter-Strike. And Counter-Strike's played all over the world. I remember reading reports in a magazine of people playing Counter-Strike in the Middle East and so on, and they're using what by our standards would seem to be very crude computers. There wouldn't be much chance of them playing Counter-Strike Source on them.
Even in the university that I go to, the idea behind Counter-Strike is that it's so lightweight that they even just put them on USB sticks. And even though our computers at university have deep freeze, so every time you reboot the computer, everything gets deleted, they just bring their USB sticks, they plug it in, and they can instantly just have a Counter-Strike LAN, which makes things a million times easier for gamers out there who just want to pick up and go.
I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to do the number comparisons. I wanted to look up EA's, just for comparison, EA's retail sales. I didn't have time to do it, but what I wanted to do is compare EA's number of games they release per year and their staff size versus Valve's, and then take that into account and see if Valve comes up on top when you look at it in the grand scheme of things. And I think they would. I don't know if anybody wants to disagree with me, but if you take into account EA's staff size and the number of games they release per year, I think Valve would still come out on top in terms of sales.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. EA might produce far more games and they might seem to get higher sales figures, but they've got 1 million people working for them, thousands of development studios churning the stuff out. So of course it's very expensive actually making the games themselves.
For me, the people who run Valve are very, very smart, and I think that they really know what they're doing, and they really understand gamers, and they really understand games more than any other company that I've had any contact with. And I don't really know about EA. I think that they make a lot of those sports games, but I really have a lot of respect for the way Valve do what they do. I don't agree with everything that they do, but I think that they're very, very smart and they do things exactly the way they want to, and it works.
Most definitely. This is definitely a good motivation technique for all Valve employees. Release your retail sales figures, and people can see how well the company's doing. And by this, I mean, the stock's going to go up too. I mean, Valve stock, people are going to see this on Gamasutra, Businesslike, check Gamasutra. People are going to invest into the company more when something like this is released. So it's a good business strategy too for Valve to do something like this.
Are they a public company? Can you buy shares?
I don't know, but if they were, I don't know if they're out on the stock market. If they are, I should put in some stock in Valve. But, I mean, the idea is you're going to have more interested business type. That's basically all I'm trying to say. Now I'm checking if they're on the stock market. Anyway, so I think that's all we can say about that. And then our last bit of news is the video of the month. Phillip, why don't you tell us about this?
I found this one by accident. I was just doing a search on Vimeo for Half-Life, and I saw this, The Road to Ravenholm, and it caught my interest. It's actually structured like a documentary, a natural history documentary, and it's about the exodus or the migration of headcrabs. And it's really, really funny. It's not supposed to be some like machinima where it tells this fantastic story. It's just like a documentary, and I really enjoyed it. I kind of watched it and I thought, wow, that's a really good way of using the assets of Half-Life and sort of twisting it. So I really liked it. Did you watch it, William?
Yeah, it reminded me of March of the Penguins, actually. If all they needed was, what's his name now? What's the guy who narrates March of the Penguins?
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman. I wanted to say Gordon Freeman. I have too much Half-Life on my mind. It was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. It really does fall. It kind of personifies the headcrabs a little bit. It makes you feel sad for them.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, they are just living creatures caught out in a difficult situation. So that was kind of funny. One thing I really want to mention is that I was having breakfast the other day, and I don't normally have breakfast, and I put some croissants on my plate, and just for 1 second, they reminded me of these head crabs just jumping up at me. It was quite funny.
I don't think I would eat a croissant then.
I never realised before how that shape of a croissant gives you that image of a head crab coming at you. So be careful, listeners, if you're having breakfast. You never know. One may come alive.
It is a very good video.
Okay, well, we've come to the end of another show. No listeners' questions this week, so please feel free to use the new audio and video comments to send in your questions as well, or you can use the usual method of just recording them and sending them. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our guests, Tobias from Suicide and Survivors, and your evil twin, especially coming on at short notice. William, do you have anything to say?
Of course, I wanted to talk about the community thing again to remind listeners to go to register on Steam and join our Steam community. Just search Podcast17 and go ahead and join the group. And this week we will be playing Suicide Survivors.
Okay, I'll be on there as well, so if you want to, frag me, you can do that. Thank you to our guests again.
Thanks very much for having me on the show. It's been great.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It was a pleasure, and don't forget, always be aware of pot plants.
Thank you to our listeners. If you want to contact us, please email at feedback@podcast17.com. Visit the website for the latest information and all the previous podcasts. Thank you, and see you next week.